Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I think everybody's just starting to join. This is a book trust webinar on reading for pleasure at Key Stage 3. So we're going to have colleagues just joining. It'll just take a minute for everybody to kind of come online. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes and then we'll make a start. Whilst everyone's joining, please do add to the chat where you're dialing in from this afternoon and what your role is. We'd love to know who's here. We're so delighted to have so many people joining us to talk about reading for pleasure. So please do. And I think in a minute, once we've got a few more people online, we're going to do a quick pop-up poll because we couldn't resist with so many colleagues joining us this afternoon asking you a couple of quick questions. So, lovely. We've got people joining us from all over the country, it looks. So that's brilliant. Fantastic. We'll just give it a couple more minutes because I know lots of people will be rushing from school settings, from sessions with students to be able to join. So I think the poll has just jumped up on screen. And what we'd like to do is we'd really like to get some feedback around the kind of terminology that you use to talk about some of the topics that we're going to be exploring this afternoon. So there's a couple of questions there. And really, we're just really interested to see how you would talk about some of the issues that we're going to be discussing this afternoon in class. So please do answer our poll. It'd be really interesting to kind of get this feedback from you all. And thank you so much for joining us. I can still see the participant numbers moving upwards. So I'll wait for a minute just to make sure we kind of give everybody a chance to jump online. But thanks so much for joining us. It's a bit of a kind of miserable afternoon where I'm sat in South London, so it's very nice to be indoors and talking about reading and lots of brilliant books as well. Fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. Brilliant. I'll just give a few more minutes because I can still see the participant numbers are still going up as people jump online. There is a poll that hopefully you can all see where we're just really interested to get some feedback on some of the terminology that you use to talk about some aspects of reading, different aspects of reading, and how you might kind of talk about students, like how you might kind of think about them if you were talking about other like you see them as reluctant readers, unengaged readers, like those kinds of different ways that you think about different cohorts within your school. Brilliant. Maybe give it just a couple more seconds for anybody who's just joining. Please do jump in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from and your role at school. We'd love to know who's here on the session with us this afternoon. Brilliant. I think we might kick off in a minute just because I'm really conscious we've got a really jam-packed afternoon. So we don't want to stay too much before we get started. So thank you so much for joining. I'm Lizzie Catford and I'm the Director of Children's Books at Book Trust. And thank you for everybody for being with us this afternoon in this webinar on reading for pleasure, where we're going to be particularly looking at sociable reading experiences and why they're so powerful in engaging those children who don't automatically identify as readers, who we might see as reluctant readers. And we've got a really interesting afternoon. Before we kick off, I just wanted to share some housekeeping. So I just wanted to let you all know that we're going to be recording this webinar, and that's just so that we can share it with you all afterwards in case you want to kind of pass it on to any colleagues who you think might be interested, and also because we have a number of people who wanted to be here this afternoon but couldn't, so we can share it with them and they can watch it back when they have the time to do that. We're also going to share all of the slides with you that you see during the session. So watch out for an email from us over the next week, and we think that will be in your inbox by Friday. So look out for that. So there's no need to kind of desperately scribble down everything that you see, because we will share that. And like, obviously, please feel free again to cascade that within your setting. It's information that we're really keen to share as widely as possible. And just so everybody's aware as well, that we've muted everyone's microphones. So that's just to avoid any kind of background noise that may make it difficult for people to hear. But please do submit any questions in the Q&A or chat box. And when we've had the panel discussions, our panelists will answer as many of them as possible. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon, and we'll kick off. Brilliant. So we've got a fantastic agenda this afternoon. So we're going to kick off with a presentation by my colleague Lee Chu, who's a Principal Research Specialist at Book Trust. And she's going to be looking and talking to the evidence base around kind of why embedding reading within socially rich experiences matters, and how that leads to kind of particular benefits. We've then got a discussion with two practitioners based in schools. So I'm really delighted to be joined by Dónall Dochartaigh, who's a senior teacher at Gael Chusda Dora School, and Julie Broadbent, School Library Association Secondary School Librarian of the Year 2025. Congratulations, Julie. And with them, I'll be talking about how they use shared reading within their settings to help engage reluctant readers. I'm also really delighted to say that we're going to be joined by Athena Kugblenu, author of History's Most Epic Fibs. And I'll be talking to her about her absolutely brilliant book. If you haven't read it, it's so funny. I really, really recommend it. And we'll be looking at that kind of role of non-fiction in shared reading, because I think people don't often automatically think about non-fiction, but it has really interesting benefits again, and like offers a really different experience for really hooking those students in. And I'll then just talk to you a little bit about BookSpark, which is a programme we've developed here at Book Trust to really support schools with getting all students engaged in reading, in particular those who may not see themselves as readers, may have some barriers towards reading, and how you can kind of break down those barriers and get and support all students to see reading as something that is for them. So without further ado, we'll kick off, and I'll pass over to my colleague Lee.
Thanks, Lizzie. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you. It's brilliant.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you. I'm Lee, and today I'll be talking about something that feels especially relevant for AF3, how shared social experiences around reading can help engage young people who might not yet see reading as something for them. So I start by briefly defining what we mean by social participation in reading, then what the research says about how it supports motivation and engagement, and finally how we're putting this into practice through our BookSpark program for secondary schools. So what do we mean by social participation in reading? Simply put, it's when reading becomes something we do with or around other people. When we talk about what we're reading, share a story, recommend a book, or laugh at a line together. For children and young people, these moments turn reading into what we call socially rich experiences, because they happen within relationships, within conversations with peers or trusted adults. Howard described this compellingly. Reading exists in a virtuous circle, where friends encourage each other to read for pleasure, and shared experiences strengthen those friendships in return. This social loop matters because it taps into what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, that sense of wanting to read for their personal reasons, rather than having to read or reading only for external rewards. Next slide, please. So what does this actually look like in schools? Research with educators describes it might mean giving pupils more space for informal book chat in groups, in pairs, or during reading time, so they start to associate reading with positive peer interaction. It might also be student-to-student recommendations, which we've seen can be especially effective for disengaged readers, because the source of influence is social, not institutional, and there's a balance in the power dynamics where pressure is removed. And it can mean creating interactive and supportive classroom environments where students can talk about what they've read or even read aloud together. Those small social exchanges can change how reading feels, less like a solitary task and more like a shared, valued part of school life. So, how exactly does social participation support children's reading? From the research, we can see three really powerful pathways at play. The first is connection. When reading feels shared, it takes on new meaning. Think of those moments when a class reads aloud together, or when a book sparks laughter or conversation. It stops being just about decoding words on a page and becomes about belonging. Students start to read not only for themselves, but with and for others. And that sense of connection is incredibly motivating because we're naturally drawn to join in with what feels joyful. And the second pathway is modeling. We know that young people watch and mirror one another all the time. When they see peers genuinely excited about a story or proudly carrying a book, it sends a subtle but powerful message that reading matters. Those everyday behaviors act as social cues, signals that people like me read. And over time, that normalizes reading. It becomes an accepted, internalized part of their social world. And the third pathway is shared emotion. Stories have this amazing ability to connect us to a feeling. When a group laughs together at a funny line or sits in silence after a moving scene, it creates emotional memory. Those shared feelings, joy, empathy, curiosity, tie reading to something deeply human. And it's that emotional resonance that keeps readers coming back. Together, these pathways show that reading isn't just an individual act, it's also relational. Next slide, please. At Book Trust, we've been putting these ideas into practice through our Book Spark program. So this program is designed to help secondary school create social reading experiences. We offer expertly designed resources and a set of 40 hand-picked books. These are chosen because they lend themselves to discussion, shared reading, and emotional connection. The idea is to make it easy for teachers and librarians to spark conversations about books without adding extra workload. Next slide, please. What's been really interesting is how flexibly schools are using it. So some have woven Book Spark into their existing reading groups or English lesson, while others said it prompted them to set up something new. Many used it with students who needed a bit of extra encouragement to engage with reading. They told us the program helped these pupils find a book that spoke to them, and that the group discussions created space for them to open up about their own experiences. And this little reflection from one pupil, which you can see on the right, really sums it up. They wrote, I thought it was very relatable because the main characters were very young, just like the readers. Also, I like the way Jennifer Killick, the author, has described the people and others. So you can feel that connection, the recognition of themselves in the story, and the appreciation of how people were portrayed. That's what we mean when we talk about socially rich experiences, moments where reading becomes personal, emotional, and shared. And that's what we continue to build on. We're learning with teachers and pupils to refine Book Spark so it helps all young people find their place in reading. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation and for all the creative and generous ways you're helping young people experience that social magic of reading. We'll be talking more about Book Spark later in the webinar. And now I'm going to hand over to Lizzie to lead us through the discussion.
Thank you so much, Lee. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when we love something, when you're really excited by something, the first instinct is to go and share that with someone else, isn't it? You want to tell them. And I think that's what we're trying to create with around books, really, that kind of that desire to share, like that joy of sharing. And like, you know, we're sociable animals at the end of the day, and we want those kind of communal experiences. As you said, they can kind of reinforce and like help us to see something as valued and also build that enjoyment. And I think so much out there, like still there's this feeling that reading is a a kind of quiet and individual experience. And of course, it's not really. So that was really, really fascinating. Thank you so much. So the next section of the webinar, we're going to go on and talk to Julie and Dónall, who I introduced at the start. And if we welcome them on screen, I'll just get them to tell us a little bit about themselves and their school. So I think we'll just do the transfer on on Zoom. But Julie, I think I can see you. Did you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role in school, and the kind of setting that you're in?
Yeah, sure. I'm Julie Broadbent. I live and work in Northampton. I work at Northampton International Academy. I've been a school librarian for about 21 years now. The school that I'm currently at is an all-through school, so it's age 4 to 18. I've got two libraries. I am a lone librarian, so I do it all myself, obviously with the help of staff and colleagues as well. And our school is in quite a socially deprived area of Northampton. We've got a large percentage of EAL students and SEN students. Our community is quite transient as well, so we do have quite a few families that move in and out of the area that we live in. So that can be, we talk about barriers, that can be a barrier. I see all of year 7, all of year 8 on a 2-week timetable, and I am supported in these lessons by an English teacher, teaching assistants, etc. So I do get support in lessons with me as well.
That's fantastic. And I think that's really interesting. Like one of the things you said, that you described yourself as a lone librarian. Obviously, you've got some wraparound support, but that's one of the reasons why we're kind of hosting this webinar this afternoon, is that we recognise that when you're in a setting, it sometimes can feel a little bit isolating if you are a lone librarian in a setting, and actually having this opportunity to kind of hear from colleagues like yourself, Julie, and like Dónall, about how you're approaching things in your school, I think is so valuable to everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. And Dónall, did you want to do the same? Did you just want to jump on and like introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your setting as well?
Yeah, so my name is Dónall Dochartaigh. I'm from Belfast, but I'm teaching in a school in County Derry. It's an Irish language medium secondary school called Gael College de Dura, which means that the students basically learn all of their subjects through the medium of Irish other than English. I'm a senior teacher, and part of my role I'm head of English for the department, have been now for around 4 years. Kind of like Julie, we have a lot of SEN students as well, but as far as the EAL aspect goes, we don't have kind of like a textbook EAL student, but what we have are a lot of students who pretty much learn, like I said, every subject in Irish. So they don't necessarily have the same kind of exposure to English literacy. They don't get the same kind of opportunities in that sense. So we have our own challenges there. But the school that I'm in is rural. It's only 10 years old, our school, but because we feed students who want to learn through the medium of Irish, we have a big catchment area, and we have about 10 or 11 different schools that feed into us from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different communities, which means we have inner city students, we have rural students, we have a whole blend. But for the most part, we're dealing with kind of white Irish students, in terms of background, excuse me.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dónall. And I should apologise to you. I did try and look up how to pronounce the name of your school, but I realised at that when I introduced you at the beginning, I did not get that right. So thank you for that. And I think it's really interesting. And I know, Dónall, we like my colleague Rose has spoken to you before, and I think it's really interesting because you have a kind of quite a specific setting that you're working in, that can probably feel quite unique in some ways. But actually, I think when we're talking about kind of developing students' attitudes towards reading, the need to kind of like break down some of those barriers and engage some students who may not see it as something for them. There's a lot that kind of unites us, and like a lot of the things that you're talking about. I know we did a case study with your school previously at book class, and it's just really interesting. I think there's just so much in kind of that practice that is so applicable to so many to so many settings. So I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of get under the skin of how you're both approaching reading in your schools, and to kind of hear a little bit more about that. so just to kick off, and maybe if I ask, I'll what we want to kind of start talking about was like kind of breaking down what we mean about shared reading, and some of the ways in which we've thought about it at Book Trust. We've thought about kind of group reading, where reading's being modelled, potentially paired reading, where you're kind of getting students to work either in pairs or small groups together, and then reading aloud, as all being ways in which kind of sociable reading experiences can be encouraged and developed as part of practice. Julie, did you want to pick maybe one of those, and talk a little bit about how you use that in your school and some of the ways in which you've developed it?
Okay, so first of all, just we've got about 1,800 students in the school, so it's a really big school.
Yeah.
As I said, we see year 7 and 8 on a 2-week timetable. But we will look at the students that we have in each class. It's really important that we have that reading data to see where everyone is at, because then it informs us of who we want to work with in either a reading group or paired reading, or the teacher or the TA will take a group, or I will take a group. So I would say 6 books we would have maybe take a small group, but we've also done whole class read, so we'll have 30 sets of a book, so we can all read it and enjoy it together. So it really depends, and we will mix it up throughout the year as well. So we usually start off with paired reading or one-to-one, listening to a student read, or then we will go and take a small group and work with those. So it really depends. It's quite fluid, but in a good way, in that the students will come in and they know the expectation is to read. That's the expectation. That is what we want everyone to be doing and enjoying. But obviously not everyone can access the same text. No. Everyone's got different abilities, especially if they're new to the UK or their ability. So that's how we look at it. So basically we'll see who's coming in, what classes are coming in, who we're working with, and then we look at the individual children, and then we'll see. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? Like always to kind of start with your cohort of students and what their needs are. And I was quite interested that you said you start with the kind of paired reading and the individual reading. And is that like, do you listen into that? Is that how you kind of get a sense for what the kind of students' attitudes are to reading, and like where their kind of confidence levels are? Is there something about that kind of activity that's particularly effective, you find, at the start of the year?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we always do it from year 7. So when it comes to year 8, it's just part of the norm. It's not something that's, they're being took out to read. It's not stigmatized. It's and a lot of students want that little bit of attention as well. They want you to listen to them. It's like that shared experience. So I don't have it. I'm being completely honest. I don't really have any issues with students being read with or read to, because that it's right from the get-go. We do it as soon as they're in year 7. That's the expectations. That's what happens. It's not anything out of the ordinary. I think sometimes you might come up against something if they're taken out of a lesson.
Yeah.
But this all happens within the library setting. So the lesson all happens in the library setting. So some may be working on their own individual books, some may be reading by themselves, some may be choosing, some may be listening or working together. So in a way, it's different from the classroom environment, because we've got the space to do different activities. And
I think, like you're saying, so just really building that expectation from the off, and that normalization around reading. That this is something we're all doing. This is all taking place. I think is really powerful, isn't it? And kind of student attitudes to seeing that. Dónall, did you want to add anything to that? Like, is there anything kind of within group reading, paired reading, reading aloud, those kinds of different activities that you find particularly powerful with particular cohorts of students, or do you use them kind of fluidly as well as kind of needed?
So I like one word that Julie used there, expectation. I really like, because I think it's important to kind of embed the culture early with
Yeah.
students to let them know that it is something that's expected and that it's something that's done. We start the year with our Key Stage 3 students, especially those who have just joined the school, with a survey, and the survey is to gauge their attitude toward reading immediately. It's just something we
Yeah.
do in the English department, to ask them how they feel about reading. Do they have access to a book? Do they have access to a book that they actually want to read? And try and gauge those things right away. And one of the things that we do as a class is we always have a starter 10 minutes at the start of the class where every student gets to read. And I know not
Yeah.
every school has that luxury, because we're lucky enough that all our English are double periods. But it's a really, really effective way of getting students reading, and getting them engaged in reading. And I know we're talking more about Spark Reading today, but we've used Book Trust's Book Buzz program for the last few
Yeah.
years to
Yeah.
help with that, because what we found is, like, when students don't have that opportunity to choose their own book, that maybe they don't have the same level of interest in it. So we try to give them an opportunity to choose something that they want to read, make sure that
Yeah.
they have a book that they now own, and Book Buzz helps us do that. Then they
Yeah.
can spend 5 or 10 minutes at the start of every lesson reading, and the teacher
Fantastic.
can go around, just ask them about their book, ask them what's happening in the book. It's not something where they need to write big long summaries, but it's more just to get them chatting about it. Lily was talking about the idea of books becoming, or sorry, Lee, excuse me, was talking about books becoming part of the social world for students,
Yeah.
and that's something that we really try and encourage as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, having that kind of sense of autonomy over what you're reading is a really important mechanism in supporting children to become effective readers. And I really liked what you were saying around the kind of survey and kind of gauging students' levels of confidence, because that is something that I guess we're very conscious of as a reading charity. One of the things that we're constantly trying to support partners to kind of break down that knowledge that some children get very quickly turned off reading if they have a kind of narrow experience of it, and they quickly feel like it's something they're not good at. Like, how do you then go back and kind of support them to reaccess and come in and see that is something for everyone? Like, it's not like, I think sometimes, if you've had that very narrow kind of assessment focus experience of reading, you can quite quickly feel, oh, I'm not good at this. And like, knowing that some students have that feeling about themselves, and how you kind of go back and break it down, and like we say, build that kind of intrinsic motivation around reading, that actually this is something really enjoyable that is for everyone, and there's that book out there that will engage and be good for everyone, and how we support students to find that. That's really interesting. I'm kind of conscious, I've taken a lot of time on the first question, so I might have to have a look at my list and whiz through. That's been so interesting to talk about. Maybe if we just talk about some barriers, because I'm really conscious as well that often, like, there's ideal world, isn't there? And like, as somebody who loves reading and loves books, I can think, oh, fantastic, like, how do we open up this brilliant experience for everyone? But the reality of working in a setting is that you will come up against students who really feel like, we've just talked about, those kind of entrenched views that this isn't something that I do, and they perhaps haven't experienced reading positively before, or they haven't had access to books at home. So I just wanted to ask about that, and like how you kind of break down those barriers for students who feel a bit reluctant about it. Dónall, I don't know if you want to kind of kick us off with some of the kind of practice that you've explored in school.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the first thing is that as a teacher, when you are choosing the books that you're going to teach students as a class reader, I feel like you have to be extremely deliberate in that choice. I think that there's a tendency, and sometimes it's budget, there's times to just take the book that you've done for years. You've got resources on it, or this is the book the department's always taught. And I think using that kind of culture, that creates that narrow experience of reading for children that you're talking about. You have to be really deliberate with the choice for the group. And part of that means you need to understand the group that you've got and what they need as individuals. Like, one example I would give you is that recently I've got 4 students at the minute who are AS students, or year 13. And they were telling me the other day that the novel that they read when they were in year 9, Noughts and Crosses, they were saying that, like, that was the novel that kind of set them on a literature path, that they loved it, that their entire class had a WhatsApp named after Noughts and Crosses. They were writing fan fiction and all this. It created that kind of emotional memory again that Lee was talking about before. And that's the kind of thing that gets it going. But if if that class doesn't get that novel and they don't respond in the same way, then
Yeah.
they may never have that experience. Now, the difficulty there is that, like, it's a teacher choosing a novel that might be based for 30, 50, 60 students. And that means that we really need to give them opportunities to access literature that they choose to access as well. So we're talking a little bit about spark reading today. And last year we took part in spark reading for the first time. And we were using it to try and engage the most reluctant readers in our school,
Yes.
ones who struggled in terms of literacy, especially. But we were taking students over to maybe our support unit, our
Yeah.
literacy support unit, that is. We had a nice selection of excellent books there, where students were able to go in and select their own books that they were interested in. And the feedback from the kids was really brilliant, because they were having opportunities to pick a book, read 10 pages of it, decide they didn't like it, and move on to another. And they were genuinely really quite excited to go over there a lot of the time. There was quite a bit of competition over the best books, the ones that they get
Yeah.
kind of into. And spark reading really, really helped us with that. I think that idea of giving a student a choice is the most important thing that you can do when it comes to literacy, because they have so much choice when it comes to TV, film, games. They can flick on and move on to the next channel, the next YouTube channel.
Yeah.
If we're only going to put one book in their hands and tell them this is reading, this is your experience, and you're never going to get that hook.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Really interesting that you used Bookspark in that way to, I guess, help students have that sense of like engagement and being able to. And it was really interesting you talking about the need to, I guess, to kind of constantly reevaluate your book stock as a school as well. And I think that's one of the things that we've tried really hard with the books, to kind of look at, like books that are published over the last year, like these new books that not everybody will have seen yet, to kind of foreground and bring to everyone's attention, so students get a chance to experience those. Julie, did you want to just talk a little bit about that as well, and like how you see breaking down barriers to students who don't identify as readers?
Yeah, I think one thing that we use that's really powerful is some of the short reads, maybe Barrington Stoke, or I use Dark Reads and Dark Flight, Badger books. And it's getting a student from beginning to end of a book can be massive, because if they've got a barrier to reading, or they struggle with reading, that to get from start to finish and then have a discussion, so at the end, I find that really helpful. And also it's like an achievement. They've got to the end, they've read the whole book, and we're not talking we're talking maybe 20, 30 pages, and they're quite accessible text as well. They're not difficult text, but for some readers to get to the end of a book is really important. And then to sit with an adult or a teacher and then just speak about it, that's where the engagement comes in, the shared reading comes in. So that's sort of where we start with those low ability students.
No, I'd really agree with that. And I think if you like have never finished a book, then you've never fully experienced that kind of narrative arc through to conclusion, to kind of see how satisfying it is, like when you go through that. And I think you're absolutely right. Like for children who've had kind of a rich reading environment at home, naturally that's what parents do during those kind of shared reading experiences, aren't they? They model like the emotional reaction to something, and how you kind of, because they'll say, oh gosh, look, they're sad, or like something, and students haven't had that to kind of, I guess, know that you can access books in that way, that it's they're there to enjoy. Fundamentally, they're a form of entertainment that's been created for you, and that that emotional response you have. Sorry, Julie, jump back in.
No, I was going to say I'm a real fan of shorter reads, with especially if you're a student who's new to English as well. Getting to the end of a book can be a massive thing, and like you say, it's it's just completing that, and then that sense of achievement, and then you can go on to the next and the next. But non-fiction as well, we use non-fiction books as well, which is always, I think, really great. That can engage, that they can engage so many readers, not just boy readers, so many readers who have interest in all sorts, so that, I think, non-fiction really does play a part in this, as well as obviously a story brilliant, sharing stories, but so many ways that you can go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well there is that less pressure on finishing a non-fiction, some forms of non-fiction where actually
Yeah,
they're designed to be like you can dip in and kind of get that like positive buzz from completing a chapter almost that you might get from reading a whole book. So it just offers that slightly easier access point sometimes for students who are
yeah.
going to struggle with the kind of stamina to complete a whole book. But
And that
yeah, really interesting.
reading for information, finding
Yeah,
fantastic facts. Sometimes those books, especially if the student's having a bad day or,
yeah,
it's not their day, and you can just sit with them and find facts
yeah,
together, work it out, and they're pretty good at regulating
yeah.
as
No,
well. So we do that as
brilliant.
well.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Brilliant. So I think we might be nearly out of time actually. I'm wondering if I should move to questions from the group. Um, just while we go to look to see if we've got any questions. Julie, I know we were talking a little bit about BookSpark, which is one of the programs Book Trust developed to kind of create shared reading. I know some of your students engaged with some of the books, and I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about kind of what they found particularly powerful about the books. And we talked about the fact that like we've deliberately gone for newer books that like people may not have experienced before. I don't know if you want to just share some of that feedback when I
Yeah,
just look
so
through the chat to see
we
any
use
questions.
BookSpark with our we've got a large reading group, and we use the BookSpark books with those, and like writers like Nathaniel Lassaur, so relatable, so
Yeah,
current, and that's what young people want as well. They want something that's relatable to them, and I know we were saying about funny books. Funny books are so important. It's great to have that an emotive read, but I think funny books um, are in there as well. So yeah, there's so many things, and that shared experience is really important as well. So
it
yeah,
is.
we had a great time with the books, and like you say, paired reading or working with a friend or reading with a friend. That's a really powerful thing. Yeah.
It is, yeah. We've had some interesting practice that some schools have done as well, like where they're, aiming to target a student who may be a bit more of a reluctant reader or finding it a bit more challenging, but actually like inviting their friendship group to a shared reading experience, then like it completely removes the stigma. It's just something that you're doing with that group. They can all participate, and you can kind of break down some of those barriers. So I've got a couple of questions. I think probably only got time for a couple. So there's a question for Dónall about which book titles did you find to be most popular or effective with reluctant readers? Were there any particular titles that you found they were really engaging with?
Yeah, so I think Julie touched on it there, but the most popular by far from the Spark reading was King of Nothing.
Yeah,
People just the kids love that book, and I think they loved it because it's relatable to them. We were dealing with children who are maybe coming from tough backgrounds, maybe who have experienced bullying,
yeah,
that kind of thing. And they really got into that book. And there was a lot of competition to have that book. It became one of the kind of favorites between the group who were reading it. But one of the other another comment in the chat there was just asking about strategies. And one of the strategies that we used with King of Nothing was some of the boys who were coming over occasionally they would just be fed up reading. They didn't want to read.
yeah,
And we got the audiobook version as well. We would ask them, okay, well, we'll play the audiobook. We'd like you to just kind of follow along, and at least answer the questions and have the discussion. So even when on those days when they were struggling to just sit down and read, they were still able to have a conversation based on literature. And the same thing kind of worked for the more graphic novels, so graphic novels or comic book styles they all work really well as well to get those most reluctant readers building their confidence. Like Julie was talking about, that experience of actually finishing a book, like
yeah.
to the end of it and thinking I've finished a book for the first time in my life is massive for some students.
It
Um,
is.
and so Agents of Suit, I think, came along last year, and the
Yeah,
students really enjoyed that. They also enjoyed, a few of them recommended Cross My Heart and Never Lie. One of the girls
yeah,
absolutely just adored that book, like carried it with her everywhere, wouldn't let anybody
yeah,
else have the book, for months because
yeah,
she was still working on it. She didn't want any spoilers.
yeah,
So, to be honest, I felt like all the books worked really well. We used I Am Wolf as kind of like a group reader for reciprocal reading
yeah,
where we would have the students sit down, just take it in turns to read aloud, give each other feedback. maybe like sit down and pick out words that they didn't pronounce properly, sit down and have discussions about the themes,
Yeah.
really kind of take their time on it as well.
It's great to hear the students responded so positively, because a lot of effort kind of goes into the book selection, and books like King of Nothing and Cross My Heart, they're really like age appropriate, but they actually deal with really mature and quite deep topics as well, like King of Nothing, and it's dealing with kind of toxic masculinity, isn't it? And we know a lot of young people are navigating that right now. So I think it kind of talks to them in a way that is both really funny, but really emotional, but also like takes them seriously and the kind of challenges that they're facing. And books like Agents of Suits as well, like it's a really fun graphic novel, and it's got quite a kind of easy access point for students who are really struggling, but it's got some really lovely language play within there and use of vocabulary. So again, it makes it quite an interesting reading experience, and again, one that can kind of really benefit students. I'm going to do one more question quickly because I'm really conscious of time. So this one's for you, Julie. I'm just going to, somebody's asking what data you use to identify pupils who'd benefit from group or paired reading. I know that professional judgment is a large part, but do you use any other data to kind of justify, monitor, and show improvement?
Yeah, we do use Accelerated Reader as well. So we don't share our reading ages with our students, but we will look at that information as a starting point to look at reading ages. So that, if that's the question that you're asking, that's what we'd look at. We also, obviously, all of our students who have additional needs will have a pupil passport as well. So we look at that in conjunction with their needs. So obviously there's things that we must consider when we're reading with our young people. So that's where we start. So that's the starting point.
Yeah.
And then we'll start our groups. So
yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that's it. Like, we're kind of very conscious that people working across multiple, kind of using multiple like tools constantly, aren't we, within school settings to support reading. And when we're thinking about how we support schools, we always think about how can we be really flexible so things sit alongside other things that are already in place, or help amplify, or work with a particular kind of issue that schools are facing. I better say thank you very much to Dónall and Julie. I feel like we could have been here all afternoon. I'm very sorry to colleagues again who asked questions that I couldn't get to, but thank you very much. And I'm really delighted to kind of welcome Athena now to centre stage, who's absolutely brilliant. But can I hold it? I know I've got to hold it to my face. Worked out before. It can't see, to talk about history's most epic bibs, which, if you haven't read, absolutely 100% get a copy of and read it. It's absolutely brilliant. Such an interesting take on history, to be honest, with you, Athena. Like, I suppose I just wanted to ask you, first of all, well, I'm going to stick to what we agreed we'd talk about. I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about why you chose to write this book.
Yeah, so I'm a writer. I write in the children's space. I write children's telly. I do kids stand up for kids. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm generally a writer as well. If it makes people laugh and you've got a right to do it, I do it. And why I wanted to, full disclosure, I actually wrote this book for adults. It's a book for adults. But all the ideas in this book are actually ideas I feel grown-ups could do with understanding. But it's really hard to write that kind of book for adults. And then I thought, fine, kids would like to know about this kind. Maybe kids want to know where racism comes from. Maybe kids want to know why women. Maybe kids want to understand why pockets on women's clothes are so small.
Pockets,
there's a chapter in there about that. And there's also lots of things that we believe that are received wisdom. So it's not true. And so, but there's no reason for that to be replicated over and over the years. So the book is really, it's for young people to get information they remember for their whole lives, which is why I say it's a book for adults. And I was motivated to write it because I thought humor is just a great vehicle for knowledge. Because if someone, I always say it's really easy to make someone who disagrees with you laugh. And that common ground is actually quite special. And I just kind of realized I was probably in a unique place to write that as a comedian and I would say amateur historian. So that's why I wanted to write it. I just wanted to, and I thought it was really interesting when Dónall said that noughts and crosses resonated with students, and it resonated with me, and I'm 44 years old. And there's a reason why it resonates, because it explains the world we live in. It makes the world less confusing. It's like when you go to opticians and they put a lens in your eyes, and that is what these books do. And one thing I always push back against is I get asked, stick to the curriculum, not to be corny, but the actual curriculum you want to follow is the curriculum of life. Like, what if I put in this book makes the world more understandable to everyone? Even there's a book in there about Sir Walter Raleigh and the potato, right? So in case you didn't know, he didn't bring the potato to the UK. Why do we believe this? Okay. And how is misinformation like that replicated today? So that's kind of the motivation, that they get information that carries them through adulthood and helps them decode. When I say they, young people get information that helps them decode the world they live in, and that is like a suit of armor against the world we live in, where they have so much information. And can't stress enough, I am a comedian. I was very keen on making it funny, like super keen.
It is very funny. And like you say, I was outraged by the pockets when I realised
yeah.
why not notice this all my life. But no, I think it's a really brilliant book, and I think it does talk to the mindset of young people. It's really interesting you said you wrote it for adults, because as adults, I do think we kind of close our brains and our thinking down, whereas kids are much more open, aren't they, to kind of looking at things differently and kind of questioning like why we kind of do things the way that we do.
This is really basic, I think. So people who know stuff are defensive when you give them new information. For a basic reason, the new information has to replace the old stuff. Who wants to be told they're wrong? Young people are intellectuals because they're curious. So they're not intellectuals because they know what we know. They're intellectuals because they're thirsty to fill that vacuum. Whereas the older you get, I mean, this is, we see this time and time again. You can give people facts and statistics about the way the world is, and then they can look at those facts and statistics, and that will not change their mind one bit, right? Young people don't operate like that at all. Young people are super open-minded, and I think I haven't given up on adults. I still try my best, but young people, I think it's more and more important to have complex conversations about the way the world is, about big things like race, society, feminism, gender, sexuality, ableism. But those can feel quite scary concepts until you realize they're experiencing these concepts on a day-to-day basis. They're getting on a bus. They're getting on a bus and they're seeing how hard it is to stick a wheelchair onto that bus. Do you know what I mean? They get onto a bus and they see maybe a same-sex couple scared to hold hands on a bus. So they live in the world which is complicated, and so what I try to do is make that world less complicated. And the cool thing about that is you incentivize the reading. So it's not read because reading's good. It's like, oh, if you read this, okay, it'll be a bit tough. Reading is hard. I acknowledge that. I think reading is hard. But once you do it, there's reward. It's like running up a hill. You know what? No one wants to run up a hill, but no one regrets it, right? If you're able, like you think, I ran up a hill today. So, that angle can really help people. And if you feel better or more well-informed, or if something makes more sense to you, even after reading one chapter of a book, guess what? You're going to read the next chapter, hopefully. So that's kind of what I go for when I try and write.
And it's really interesting because reading is hard, but I think you make it easy because of the humor. And we were talking about this earlier when we were just kind of catching up before we started the webinar. Like, I find your tone really interesting because I think a lot of nonfiction people think about like a kind of more of a sort of didactic, I'm going to tell you tone. And the tone you adopt is so conversational. It's like reading a book is like chatting with a friend. It really is. And just kind of finding out all this. Is like having the most interesting conversation with the most interesting person. And that's really hard to achieve. I don't know if you just wanted to talk about that a little bit, about humour. And you described it as banter, that you feel like it's banter. But I think it's really hard to achieve, but really powerful in terms of talking to somebody on the same level and, all of that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
In both the adult and children's world, non-fiction is very much did you know? And I read a lot of history books, and I read a lot of history books, and I think we actually have all the answers, but they're hidden in quite complex texts, right? I mean, not everybody wants to read Frantz Fanon or Simon Schama and all this. I do, but I'm weird, right? Most people don't. And there's no reason for the ideas they talk about or the things they talk about to not exist in a slightly more accessible medium. Other than that, no one's done it, or few people do it. And that's just basically it. Like, I find this stuff really interesting, but I acknowledge my motivation to read this stuff comes from being incredibly privileged, incredibly literate, incredibly motivated to sit down. The last book I read was 800 pages. I mean, I'm just like, I acknowledge most people won't read that book. So, because 800 pages, right? Who has the time? So, but you can distill that into, and we do that with so many other things, but we tend not to do it with history. And I think what you said is really important. Like, I probably am more uniquely qualified to do this because I am a humorist, and I am somebody who engages quite academically with history. So it's like you put the two things together and that's the cake you get, right?
Yeah.
How many creatives have that background? It's probably not many, but also we're not necessarily incentivized because the book market, and we should talk about this because the book market is a commercial market.
Yeah.
And then we have to make the case for those kind of books being commercial in order for them to be made. And once they are, loads of Athenas will pop up out of the woodwork, loads of us, because the market will have proven to be there. What I think is really important though is that like we always underestimate the ideas that children can comprehend. And I think once we realise that they are way easier to talk to about these things than adults. If I go to a comedy club and I mention race, everyone does this. But if I go to a school, arms go up and they want to ask me questions, right? And I think I love leaning into that curiosity and willingness to ask questions and the passion for learning. Even if children don't have a passion for reading at that point in their time, they've got passions for other things, and it's about saying, even if the reading isn't for you, the thing you get after it is gonna be for you. It's the conduit, and that is probably one argument that works as well. But also, if you like reading, I think you like the books too. I think it's not one book for non-readers and one book for readers. Actually, this is one book you can enjoy. Well, there's lots of books that you can enjoy at any level. I think that is also really important too. So a more reluctant reader can have that conversation. And again, what Dónall said about the audio version of the book, allowing people to access the world, so the readers could then have that. It means you're all in a shared space, and you're not feeling like you're not as smart as your friends, or that there's a tendency to call like readers like bookworm. They're not bookworms. They have accessed something in a certain way, and you can access it in a different way, and you can both be some kind of worm. I don't know what we'd call an audiophile, like whatever, but like it's like you can both enjoy it. You just use different formats to get to it, and that's okay.
And I think it's really interesting. I think all that's really interesting, but I think it's really interesting what you're saying, partly about, I guess, the children's book market and how hard it is for things to kind of cut through. And I think that's really important for everyone on this call to know to some extent, because I think schools and school libraries play such an important role in supporting students to kind of know about and access books that they're just not going to like be able to discover on their own. And I think that's a really important thing to hold on to, that we need to kind of make sure that students get to see this range of books and to have that experience, that kind of full range. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about that, and we've talked about that a lot, about that kind of the social nature of reading, that if you love something and your book is one that really lends itself to sharing and talking about because you read it, it's so funny and it's so full of like interesting and different perspectives, that like kind of like things that you've always taken for granted or assumed, and it kind of gives you that different take, and that really supports, I think, people wanting to share that, wanting to talk about it, which is one of the things that we've been really keen to talk about today. I'm really conscious of time, so I should probably move to stop asking my own questions and move to some questions from the audience. So let me just pull up the Q&A and see if people have been popping their questions in there. I can see in the general chat someone's keen to know if you do school visits. I
do, and listen, I love them. I am a performer, and I have very interactive material that I do. I have a show for both my books, and yes, I do school visits, and they are noisy, but informative, but noisy. But yeah, I do. Yeah,
we love noisy when it's about reading. It's interesting. I don't know if these are so much questions for you, Athena, but I can see that within the chat there's been a lot of kind of conversation about, I guess, kind of restricting books and age ranges, and like this has been a debate that's kind of long gone on around the kind of children's book world, isn't it? Like when you're trying to make recommendations, like what do you have any thoughts on that kind of like how to support students with book that's age appropriate, but also like not wanting to restrict books? I don't know. I think they're not really kind of questions. I guess there's people kind of debating a little bit in the chat, and it's something to kind of constantly navigate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably reiterate what I said before. Like, children live in the same world we live in, so we have to arm them with the information that allows them to navigate that world. If we do that with appropriate language, with an understanding of how best to use the lexicon that will distill information, and also safeguarding as well, which is really important. But I think that sometimes, and all adults do this, and I'm not an educator and I don't work in safeguarding, so this comes as I'm a layperson to this topic, but what I would say is that we often project our fears onto what we tell and don't tell young people, because you want to protect them from things in the world that aren't nice. But they experience the minute from 5 years of age they go into a school and they experience. I'll just give a quick anecdote. When my daughter went to school, we live in a diverse area, but she's the only African in her school, and she was like, well, why is everybody pink? Neutral question, right? It's just such a they're exposed to the idea of difference, whether you like it or not. So it is incumbent on us to give them the information they need to know difference is brilliant, difference is beautiful, curiosity is amazing. And also your friends are pink, but she comes from Turkey, she comes from Syria, she comes from Greece. Okay, so there is a racial differentiator, and that is skin color, but there's other differentiators too: nationality, language, religion. These are conversations that I had because I had to have them, and I think, and now I've had them, obviously all her friends are great, she's thriving, it's lovely, but you so when we talk about age appropriateness, we have to always remember that you also need to give your kids the information they need to just get along with people, and some of that will be understanding. I said earlier on, I said, if you run up a hill, you will, that's great. Not everyone can run up a hill, man. Like, this is not, like, you have to see, and most people will not be offended because they will understand. It's like, but I'm conscious of it, and this is kind of this is what I would love to leave young people with. This is the idea that it's okay to think of other people, and to think of other people, you might need to have an understanding of these ideas that are icky. They're icky, but once you understand them, it makes you less icky because you get to be cool.
Absolutely.
So
and books are such a great way as well, like you say, enabling some of those conversations, like giving different perspectives, showcasing different experiences, and just such, giving like the platform to different voices and different backgrounds. So it's really a really important thing to do. I'm really conscious of time, so I think we better finish there. Athena, thank you so much, and a really interesting kind of conversation has been going on in the chat. So thanks to everyone who's been contributing to that. I think we've got 3 minutes left. So I would just very quickly, we've mentioned Bookspark a number of times. Athena's book is one of the 2026 Bookspark books, and obviously Julie and Dónall have taken part in the previous year. So Bookspark is a program that we developed with this issue in mind, that we've been talking about, like how we could best support schools to be able to kind of build those social reading experiences. And it really exists to kind of inspire Key Stage 3 students to read regularly and build their reading enjoyment. The programme is live for this year if schools want to take part. So if we just move on to the slides, so we can show the books. Brilliant. Oh, you can't see all of them here, but it's good, some information about it. So the pack consists of 40 books. There is a cost for the programme. It's £220, but that gives a 35% saving off the cover price of all of the books, and it comes with lots of additional support materials for you. So there are guided sessions, like discussion guides that you can use, author videos for the group reading titles where they're talking about their book. We're running a live virtual author event with Jennifer Killock talking about her book that you can take part in. And there's lots of other assets that come with it, things like posters and supporting videos. And if we just go on one more slide, I think you can see all of the books that are here in this year. So yeah, lots of brilliant books. And we've talked a bit about the books that were selected last year, but this is this year's title. And obviously you've heard a lot about History's Most Epic Fibs, which I wholeheartedly recommend, but like a really good range of fiction and non-fiction, some of the graphic novels that we've talked about, some really good kind of access points for students that really you need to really kind of dip back in to rebuild their confidence and give them that positive experience. But some lovely, some short stories as well. But yeah, across a whole range of kind of fantasy, ghost stories. Shrapnel Boys, a really interesting story, again, kind of picking up for those students that enjoyed King of Nothing. It's set in the Second World War, but again, it explores the relationship of two brothers and kind of picks up on some of those themes of, I guess, growing up and kind of different forms of masculinity and what sort of kind of positive masculinity. So yeah, really interesting books to get your teeth into this year. Thank you so much. We're at 5 o'clock, so I appreciate we're probably at the end. I think we've got one more poll that there's some lovely bits from our student readers, some lovely drawings you just saw flash up. But I think we've got one more poll that we would love you to just take part in, just to help us make our webinars as relevant and as to your needs as possible. So let us know if there's a theme that you would like us to explore, or something around students reading that you're struggling with, because as Children Read Charity Book Trust, we exist to help every kind of child growing up in this country to develop that regular reading habit, because reading just has such profound benefits across so many outcomes, most educational, but also across kind of well-being, health, and relationship formation. So that's what we're here to do. So please do let us know how we can best support you to do that. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been such a good session. And thank you so much again to Julie, Dónall and Athena, and Lee in particular, for sharing their insights this afternoon. Thanks, everyone.